Hi there. I'm Heather Hennessy from Heather Hennessy Life Coaching. Welcome to today's Facebook Live about anxiety reduction for new mothers during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think this topic is really important and I appreciate you joining me today. I think that anxiety reduction is something that all new mothers need. I certainly needed it when I was a new mother not very long ago. But here during this specific time, and I'm recording this video on March the 30th, 2020. So over the weekend, the president extended his, orders or suggestions for people to stay at home through the end of April. So we're sort of looking at um, this as being something that we're all going to continue as a society for a while. So it's sort of entering a new phase for everybody. So I thought I would take a few minutes and spend some time talking to all of you new mothers out there who might be really having a tough time of it and having a lot of anxiety and extra stress right now. For those of you who are familiar with me, you know that I come in quiet on these videos. My audience is new mothers, so I assume that you have a baby nearby who is sleeping or who you wish were sleeping. So I do not shout at you, but I am thrilled that you are here. Thank you so much for watching today. So, you know, how to begin kind of framing this up for people. The thing is, right, when you're in sort of an anxiety spike and you're feeling very overwhelmed and your stress level is through the roof, where do you even start to have a conversation with yourself about bringing that stress down? So my starting point with you today is that if you are a new mother right now during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think you have a big advantage to the rest of society. What? Does that sound crazy? I'm not crazy. I am very serious. And I invite you today to spend a little time with me going to the place where this is the perfect time to be a new mother. And if your brain heard me say that and your brain went, she's full of BS, what a crazy woman, then you really need to listen. Okay? It is a bizarre time to be a new mother. I will grant you that. If you're thinking this is the worst possible time to be a new mother, it's a pandemic for crying out loud. Totally normal, right? Like that's how our human brains are wired to think. I hear you. I hear you on that. But that line of thinking that this is a terrible time to be a new mother, that we're in the middle of a pandemic, that there's no way this is going to work, that, we're all doomed. That thinking is not serving you. That thinking is causing you a level of stress and anxiety that's not helpful to you. So your brain acts as if those thoughts are really important, but they're actually not. Your brain is actually incorrect about that. So I'm going to sort of demystify why your brain is thinking that right now and, what else you could be kind of thinking on purpose instead. That's really what all of this is about, right? Like having your brain kind of running around on autopilot, making you feel terrible and be miserable. That's no way to live. That's no way to live for anybody. But it's definitely no way to live if you're a new mother. And what I would not have given for this information when I was a new mother, because I was at the mercy of the crazy woman who lives in my brain. And she was miserable. So here we go. Like I said, these thoughts, that this is a terrible time to be a new mother, and it's a pandemic, and this is all, we're all doomed. It's causing you stress, it's heightening your anxiety, and it's all weakening your immune system, right? Like those combined forces of stress and anxiety are weakening your immune system. And what do we know? We know that little babies are picking up on the uh, the biochemical state of their mothers. So whatever your state of anxiety is, your baby's picking up on it. That's just science has told us that. And if you think about it, that kind of stress is not where you want to be right now all the time. We want to give you some places to find some relief. So everyone is experiencing heightened anxiety right now. We just are, as a society, as a world, as a nation, in our individual communities, and inside our families. We are all anxious and stressed out and worried about ourselves and worried about each other. It's totally normal right now. But what I think that you need as a new mom right now during this pandemic is a way to step out of the freak out periodically and downregulate your stress levels. If you're operating at a stress level up here all the time, I just want to give you a way to shift that down occasionally. And with practice, you can get that occasionally to be frequently. This is a gift to yourself and to your baby. It's not going to come naturally. That's the bad news. The good news is it can be done, but it's going to take practice. So last week I offered one sort of very practical tool. So you can go back and watch that video also. It's here in my feed. And last week's tool was almost like a cognitive therapy tool for everybody. Let me offer a different perspective today. This is a different way to approach the same kind of stress reduction. Is possible set of new thoughts that you could put into use for yourself. And there's no wrong way to reduce your stress. If you tried something and it didn't work, try something different. Keep on, looking for solutions. It's fascinating. When I was a new mom and I was trying to find this stuff, there just wasn't enough of it out there. So here you go. I'm going to keep giving this stuff to people the whole way through. So it's so fascinating. Being a new mom at any time is bizarre. It just is. Your whole life changes, your body changes, your schedule changes, the way you relate to the world and to other people changes. I've talked about this in the past, right? Where I feel like my, alignment in my life was sort of pointing one direction. And after the baby came, it was, a complete gravitational shift. That is bizarre. New first-time motherhood is that radical of a shift for people. It was that radical of a shift for me. I've talked about this in the past too. There are people who just kind of glide into motherhood without too much grief or angst. I go on the assumption that those people are not, on the internet searching for how to reduce their anxiety. They're just going about the business of being moms and they're fine and everything's fine. Good for them. That's totally great. For the rest of us, like me, I was my world was upside down. I didn't know, I didn't know what end was up anymore. It was a complete gravitational shift for which I was totally unprepared. That's how, my clients usually approach me. That's how I approach them, as though this new baby has turned your world upside down and you were completely unprepared for it. So that's where I'm going to assume that we are right now. I think our current circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic and social distancing are really interesting to examine through the lens of new motherhood, right? So let's take off, what society is looking at right now. Let's look at this specifically as though everybody is a new mom. And why do I think this is so important for us today? Because I spent the first year and a half of my baby's life in a state of anxiety, panic, and stress. I was there constantly. It was a wonderful time having a new baby and being a mom for the first time, but it was also incredibly stressful for me. I felt terrible more often than not. My job as a coach is to help you, the new mothers of the world, feel less terrible. I don't want you to go through the grief and the stress and the terrible feelings that I went through. Or at least I want you to have less of that and more of the wonderful parts, right? If it's sort of like the wonderful parts and the grief are sort of equal for you, let's increase the wonderful and decrease the grief and the terrible. I take this job very seriously. So I have a variety of tools to offer. And like I said, I'm just going to keep on putting stuff out there. But let's set our expectations here in a couple of different ways. Number one way to set our expectations, we are not aiming for perfect. One of my mantras in life is perfection is not the goal. Perfection is also not the strategy. And now I have to have that mantra because I am a complete and total recovering perfectionist. So we are not aiming to completely escape your anxiety. We are all experiencing anxiety right now. It's a pandemic, don't you know? And we're experiencing a variety of other negative emotions, right? Concern for our loved ones, concern for ourselves, concerns about the economy, all of it. That's normal. All we are trying to give you is a place where you can go to get some relief from your anxiety on occasion and then on the regular. And then you can sort of park yourself there, as often as you need to. Point number two to set our expectations. Your brain and your body as a new mom or an expecting mother, some of you might be expecting mothers, are in a mode where this type of down regulation of your stress and your anxiety requires intention and practice. Your biochemistry during pregnancy and after you give birth have you in a state of hyper awareness and heightened concern about the baby. What is that, right? That's a relic from our ancestors who, had to have that kind of hyper vigilance all the time in order to keep babies alive, right? Like the mothers who are hyper vigilant, their babies were more likely to survive. And so that hypervigilance in mothers, biochemically, right? Um, all the hormone mixtures and your sort of level of mental awareness of the baby that got passed down for the surviving children, right? Because those mothers were paying more attention to procuring food and shelter and, kind of having um, all of the things, right? If something was wrong with the baby, they went to fix whatever was wrong. So that hypervigilance got passed along to us. That was a really helpful thing biochemically when we were living out in the wilderness. It is not especially helpful today, but it's with us. Like here we are, right? That's just how the brain of a pregnant woman and a brand new mom work. You're just wired that way. It maybe that alone demystifies some of what's happening to you. If your stress level is up here, biochemically, that's where your body thinks it needs to be because you're an expecting mother or a brand new mother. So it's like this constant, like, pay attention to the baby, pay attention to the baby. Your brain and your body are are hardwired to keep you protecting the baby, worrying about the baby. Where is the baby breathing? What's going on? So, um, it's going to require intention and practice to downregulate some of that. We start where we are. If you were telling yourself that it's wrong to be as anxious as you are, that line of dialogue inside your head is actually not helpful. Start where you are. You're expecting or a brand new mother. You are hyper vigilant about that baby because you're supposed to be. You're hyper vigilant about yourself because you're supposed to be right now. So just give yourself a lot of grace in that, and recognize that your brain, that hardwiring in your brain, sees all of the news about the pandemic and, who's got it in my community and how many cases are there in my city, all of that stuff. Your brain is putting that information into this biochemical hardwiring and interpreting all of it as a threat to you and the baby. All of it. So you will need to intentionally work to counter this hypervigilance with practice. But i- any part of this work that you do is going to bring you some improvement for sure. So as I said at the beginning, I actually think that new mothers and expecting mothers have a huge leg up on the rest of society right now. So why do I say that? For several reasons. The first big reason is that you either have a new baby or you are expecting a baby, and you get to love this new baby. Let's breathe into that for a minute. So I said a few moments ago, right, that my first 18 months of motherhood, there was a lot of grief and a lot of feeling terrible and a lot of anxiety. There was also so much love for this new baby, so much overwhelming love like I had never felt before. Guess what? That is an asset to you right now as you take in the information about this pandemic. Being in love and having that feeling of love for your baby will bring down your anxiety levels, right? It sort of releases that different chemical complex that goes through your nervous system and through your bloodstream and helps to counter some of that anxiety. And I have found that since I became a mom, it is much easier for me to tap into that feeling of love in my body. Like it's much closer to the surface. And interacting with my son and having that sort of like a mothering experiences with him brings that love to the forefront of my mental and emotional experience in a way that is a leverage point for me. And I want to offer to you that that's a leverage point for you as well. So, in those moments where you're flooded with anxiety, you can bring some thoughts of your baby to mind and counter some of that anxiety with a flood of love. You can do that on purpose. It's okay to do that. Like to, you know, set a timer on your phone or whatever, right? If your brain's sort of running away with you about the pandemic, once an hour for 10 minutes, I'm going to sit around and love on my baby on purpose. Like, front of brain, I'm going to put that love right here at the front of my brain and sit in that just to purposefully and intentionally downregulate my immune system and give my brain something to do other than freaking out. Also, you have a new baby to pay attention to, right? So there are lots of people who are in their houses by themselves with Netflix or by themselves with the internet, right? Just like scrolling the news feed, or in their house with a kid who can't figure out their fifth grade math and they're having to, work and figure out math at the same time. You're in your house with a tiny baby, or you're in your house and you're pregnant. Focusing on the baby and focusing on your mothering of yourself and the baby, I think is an excellent way to put your mental and emotional energy right now. It just will keep you with a focus other than the pandemic and freaking out. Now, be careful with this though, right? Like if you're like focusing on your baby as an excuse to have worry and concern about the pandemic, don't do that. Just focus on, my baby and I are safe. My baby and I are healthy. My baby and I are together and we're in the house and, just whatever's going on that's going really well for you right now, focus on those things. Um, so it's kind of just shifting into a mental and emotional state where you are just here for motherhood. You're just here for it. You're here for all of it, right? Like the parts of it where everything is going really, really well, the parts of it where it's not going really well, but you're paying attention to your role as mother rather than sort of spinning out in anxiety. So, um, so what might this look like on a practical level? So I have a few suggestions here. These are just suggestions. If you can think of something that's more useful to you, go for it. But I thought I would just offer a few things. If your brain can't come up with anything, here are a few suggestions for how you could actually, put some of this into practice. The first is spend less time looking at the news and social media. We all want to stay informed. We all want to know what's going on. We all want, the facts. You can gather that in less than half an hour a day. So if you're spending a lot of time consuming the news, if you're spending a lot of time on social media, it's okay to cut that out. You might feel a lot better if you do cut it out and, set a timer on yourself. I will spend, half an hour a day gathering information from my chosen and trusted news sources. Everything else I can let go of. Um, Social distancing, easy for the new moms and the pregnant, very pregnant women of the world. You just feel compelled to be at home anyway. Yeah, just go with it. Just, hole up and love on that baby and love on yourself. Take really good care of yourself. And that could manifest itself in dozens and dozens of different ways. This is really what we talked about last week. Um, your self-care and your immune system support are really important right now. This is working on, tiny habits, tiny changes. Like I said, like I said last week, this is not about giving yourself some aspirational to-do list of, I'm going to lose all my baby weight. No, this is, I'm going to take a multivitamin, right? Like if you're like me, you were sort of taking the prenatal vitamins, but then after the baby came, it just got lost in the shuffle. You go back to taking that vitamin, or you do some things to improve your sleep. Like if you're, trying to nap when the baby's napping, like get a sleep mask, get a white noise machine, get some blackout curtains, right? Amazon will bring all this stuff to your doorstep. You don't have to go anywhere to get any of it. So you take tiny, tiny little things that can improve your sleep, your nourishment for your body, and, if you're breastfeeding, right, that's nourishment straight to the baby, right? Like tiny little things that just help you feel better. It is, there's tons of information out there. Don't get overwhelmed in it. Just pick one thing. Go back and watch last week's video. That was really this cognitive tool that I talked about a little while ago. So through the lens of new motherhood, I invite you to consider how all of these things are true. You are doing exactly the right things right now. Staying home, check. Focusing on your baby, check. Self-care, check. Hey, if you're doing those things, you're better off than most of society at this point, right? You probably know people who have taken this phase of social distancing and sheltering in place and spent a lot of time in sort of misery and concern. People might be drinking too much. People might be overeating, right? Whatever they're doing that's not serving them, you can, through the lens of new motherhood, sort of say, oh, I'm actually doing really, really well right now. I'm doing all the things that I can be doing to benefit myself, and I'm minimizing the things that are, eventually negatives for me. You are allowed to think to yourself, this is going really well. That my experience as a new mother during the COVID-19 pandemic is actually going really well. You're allowed to think that. And like I said earlier, your brain might be going, this woman's crazy. She makes no sense. What is the upside of thinking that this is all a disaster? Answer that really and truly. What is the upside of having a train of thought that this is a horrible time to be a new mother, that this is going really terribly, that this is all nothing, none of this is supposed to be happening? There's no upside to that thought. But having the thought, this is going really well, there's upside to that thought, right? Like that thought leads you to feel a little bit better, reduces your anxiety and your stress level, down regulates uh your neurochemistry in a positive way, and from that place you can start to feel a little bit better. Again, we're not aiming for perfect here. If you just feel a little bit better from thinking that thought on purpose a few times a day, that's tremendous relief to you. This is the perfect time to be a new mom. Why is that statement true? Because it is what's happening for you right now. So thinking anything about that this is a terrible time to have had a baby, if only I had had the baby 6 months earlier, if only we had waited, whatever your train of thought is, that's arguing with reality. And there's a sort of a founding person in the life coaching world named Byron Katie. And one of her quotes is, you can argue with reality, but you lose 100% of the time. And that is a true statement. You lose 100% of the time. So if your reality right now is that you are a brand new or expecting mother during the COVID-19 pandemic, this is the perfect time for you to be having a baby. And you are doing really well. Another thing that you can think on purpose during this time is that you are going to get plenty of time to heal and to adjust to new motherhood. And this is a useful thought because in my own case, my own experience was that after I started to feel a little bit better, I kind of felt like I should shift back into like full gear. like life as I knew it. Here I come. And I don't think that that served me at the time. I think I could have done with some more downtime. I think I could have done with some more time sort of sequestered in my house with the baby. I think I could have done with some more time saying no to social obligations. So you get to do that. You get to really heal your body. You get to really spend time alone with the baby, connecting. You don't have to entertain guests. You don't have a bunch of people coming over to meet the baby. All of that stuff that, looking back on it, I could have done differently, right? I just could have had, a completely different experience. Look at those as positive things. Start to view that with a little bit more of a positive spin on it. Um, Again, I'm not suggesting to you or to myself or to anybody else that I know that we all kind of think about this pandemic through rose-colored glasses, but I do think that we can view this in a way that helps us get through the day, helps us care for ourselves and our new babies, and down regulates our stress levels in meaningful ways. That's the goal. The goal is not to go live in some fairyland where everything is fine. That's not helpful. The goal is not to have a stress response that is harming your immune system, causing you undue anxiety, and just generally not serving you. So, um, the place where you can go, so, what we're talking about here is this intentional anxiety reduction. I think another potentially useful tool for you is what I talk about in, like, if you've watched anything about sort of meditation or breathing exercises, where they talk about just getting present, right? Getting sort of present in the moment, present in your body, present with your breath. This is easy to do with a new baby around, right? Because you've got this fascinating new baby. Like I said, your brain is hardwired to be fascinated by your new baby and taking care of your new baby. So when you and the baby are close, when you and the baby are skin to skin, or you're feeding the baby, right? So you can take the baby's tiny hand or tiny toes, right? And just focus being present with your tiny baby. That presence alone, that sort of focus on yourself and your baby physically, you and your body holding your baby, being really present in that moment, that alone will turn down a lot of the volume on your stressful brain chatter. So use that tool as well. Love for yourself and your baby, and presence with yourself and your baby. If you can get into any kind of habit of doing these things, I think you can really make a difference for yourself. Um, in in so give it a try. Let me know how it goes. You can always message me and tell me how it goes. These uh, practices of, loving on purpose, being present on purpose, it's much better than ruminating about the pandemic. It's much better than just having this out of control thought spiral. We talked about the thought spiral last week, this sort of loop that our brains get into. So if you go back and watch that video, you can see how I talked about the loop. This habit that I'm suggesting about loving on purpose and being present on purpose is a really useful thing to interrupt that loop. Really, really helpful. The other trick about being present is that it can kind of shut down the chatter that, this is a terrible time to be a new mom. If you're present with your baby, if you're present physically and mentally with your baby, it's just going to feel so good, right? Like you just let yourself leverage that good feeling of presence with you and your baby to, again, tone down that mental chatter and enjoy your first, either enjoy the end of your pregnancy or your early motherhood, far more than would otherwise be the case. So I'll go ahead and conclude for today. We've been going for almost 40 minutes. So if you have any questions about any of this or any thoughts for me, feel free to send me a message. Again, my name is Heather Hennessy from Heather Hennessy Life Coaching, and I specialize in coaching women over the age of 40 who are new or expecting mothers. Those are first-time moms. So thanks so much for joining me today. Let me know how it goes. Take care.